I met you yet, sir?
Marv,
What's that?
Marv Schmidt.
Marv Schmidt? Wesley Bennett.
I live right down the road from you.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. On Liberty?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
There's you, there's Wayne, and then there's me. Then there's Al.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know Alan on lead, I know Wayne, and then there's two new people that moved in on the other side of me. Nick and Rose are their names.
Okay.
So.
Oh, yeah, where Von Melville's old house. Okay.
We're so sad to see her go.
As far as I know, she's still in, isn't she still in the, what's it called there? The old golf course?
Yeah.
Hillcrest?
Yep.
Classic,
That's
classic.
where she is.
The
But,
classic.
You know, it was just so great having such a nice neighbor, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We would help her from time to time when she needed something. It was just a nice neighbor to have.
What I interpreted is normally you allow people in general to call it a digital bulletin board, which I think is the closest sign equivalent, right? Digital bulletin board, that's nobody's changing on paperwork anymore. It's not a digital bulletin board, that's probably the closest equivalent, that's the closest equivalent to cap and zoning, but it's still just a size and that. Oh,
Possibility of the residual revenue from the intermunicipality library agreement and somehow get their cut on this.
Sorry, having a tough time. Sorry.
Good, how are you?
Really good, the temperature's coming down,
Yeah.
humidity's dropping,
Yeah.
the breeze is really nice, isn't it?
I've only been outside for about 5 seconds to take me to the van, so I don't know yet. Actually work from home and I work in a dungeon downstairs in my basement.
So it's probably relatively cool if you're in the downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking like being out doing a few things this morning when mist was falling and needing to be with 100%.
That's the challenge.
Okay, I'm gonna open the Zoom meeting if that's okay, so
Yeah,
that
sure.
one of our alternates apparently is
Coming in that way?
coming in that way.
Okay, who's that?
Yeah, pretty tired.
Recording in progress.
Are we gonna get to a quorum?
I think we're at a quorum right now,
Okay.
right?
Well, we gotta have four of five, right, or? Well, there's five
Val?
members plus alternates, is that what there
Val-
is?
Gwen's not gonna be here, but Val was supposed to be here,
Oh.
so she's the alternate.
Oh, okay. And who else are we missing then? Anybody else? No? Okay.
And there.
Congrats, Mark.
Hmm?
Congrats.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, he was a big boy, 9 pounds, 1 ounce. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we have everybody.
Is she on?
Yep.
Oh, okay, wasn't sure. I didn't hear her.
And I think we might have the sign, but we have 2 people on Zoom. One of them might be the applicant. I think.
Oh,
No, not real certain.
okay, very good. All right, we'll call to order the meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's 2 minutes after 6 per the clock here. And first order of, on the agenda will be for Joan to call the roll.
Bennett,
Here.
Callahan,
Here.
Hoekstra, she's not here. Keen,
Here.
Mattoon. Here. Schmidt.
Here. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda, which you hopefully all have a copy of in front of you, all of the membership. And if not, the singular item is the Sign Art USA application for a variance for St. Paul's Lutheran Church located at 721 South State Street. Can we have a motion to adopt said agenda?
I moved to adopt.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of adopting the agenda, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, we'll proceed into the agenda then, and as a opening introduction, I guess, I'll start, and then we can go around the horn from there with comments, questions, or if our zoning administrator wants to make comments. But again, we're here as members of the Zoning Board of Appeals to look at this application. The board's purpose is to look at the reasoning behind said request and determine whether or not it can be concurred with. In order to be concurred, it would require 4 of 5 members to agree with it. What's being requested is an area variance as discussed in the zoning code. Such variances are limited to height, bulk, setbacks, area, yard, parking, and basement requirements only. So we can go into the definitions of some of that if necessary, but that's the writing in the zoning code. Whatever our decision today, we shall support it with written findings of fact and reasons. The standards under which the zoning board will look at granting said variance are noted at 26870 E, where either we need to see an unnecessary hardship, unique circumstances. We need to note that it's not based exclusively on the desire to increase the value, that it's necessary for the preservation of employment, of substantial property rights, and it will not adversely affect the health, welfare, and safety of persons residing or working in close proximity. So those are the standards under which we will examine this request. The specifics of the request is that the sign as designed by Sign Art is 42 point something, what is it, 42 point something, 47 and 1/8, there, I'm sorry, 47 and 1/8 square feet. Under the zoning would be limited to 32 square feet. So we're exceeding the size by, about 15 square feet. The opinion of Jared McKee, the zoning administrator, is that there are special considerations which we should discuss for a sign located at a church and in a residential district, but that his recommendation as written and that we all received is that we do not approve said request. So with that introduction, I'll open it up and I'll see if zoning administrator Jared wants to make further comments.
Yeah, I can make a couple comments on this. So, I guess as I stated in my letter, I actually don't have a problem with the sign. A digital, we're calling it a digital billboard is how I'm reading it in ordinance, but a digital billboard or a digital display sign in front of a church or school. I'm not sure what they're calling it here, whether it's for Little Lambs or for the Lutheran Church. I mean, it's kind of a similar organization there. But a digital billboard in front of it that, hey, Little Lambs is doing this or the Lutheran Church is doing X, Y, or Z. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. It's on State Street, which is, I think, appropriate. We have a similar sign at the school, to be real honest. It's a little different, but it's a similar size sign at the school. so in and of itself, the sign I don't have a problem with. There would obviously need to be some setback requirements as far as where it's at on the lot. My problem comes in with what's actually written in our ordinance and what we have ability to do in the variance. So if you look in our ordinance, the statute that I found that most closely aligned with the sign that was being requested was 268-42B, which reads, bulletin boards and the 268-42 is signs requiring a permit in all zoning districts. So residential, these are allowed in all zoning districts, but they have to have a permit. A bulletin board and identification sign on or off sign. Bulletin boards and identification sign for churches, schools, and other permitted institutions and nonprofit organizations not exceeding 32 square feet. One per zoning law on which such is located. Such a sign shall be located entirely within the property line of the use. So clearly, this paragraph, or B, is trying to identify this very thing, that this isn't necessarily for homes, your home-based business, come look at my new knitting supplies, or come wish so-and-so happy birthday. This is identified specifically in our code for schools and churches. They could easily have it all be within their lot. This is the provision that they use to permit the schools. I'm not sure how they permitted the schools, because it's over, as I measure it, it's over their same 32 square feet. And on top of that, 32 square feet typically shows both sides of the sign. Now, if could say that maybe we're doing it on one side, 32 feet per sign, but typically when you have a sign limit, it's for both sides of the sign, and they are cumulative. But all the same, my only problem with this is that we are limiting it to 32 square feet. And as I measure as I look at the plan set, it's clearly above that, whether it's 42 or 84 or some other number, depending on how you're figuring it, it's clearly above the 32. Which is why and I guess back up one more step, as the chair mentioned in 268-70, we state that under area variances permitted under this section shall be limited to the following so-called area variances. Variances which are limited to height isn't a problem, bulk isn't a problem, setback isn't a problem. Area is the only one that I thought we could talk about, but if you go look at area in our zoning, we're talking about the minimum lot size, whether it's 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet. You look at our area, if you look in R1, R2, we're talking about how big the yard has to be.
That's in definition of terms, is that what you mean when they define area?
So if we look at like, let me see if I can find one. But area is the only one that I can come up with that we could possibly be granting it under is area. It's not a setback, it's not a yard, it's not parking, it's not basement. It's just plain not on the list of things that we're allowed to grant variances for. With the possible exception is if we squint really hard to come up with something for area. I personally didn't think that was the case, but that could be an exception if I'm missing something. I'm trying to see if I can find this area definition. I'll look for that, but I guess that's why I recommended that we do not.
I had the same thought. That's when I read it, I said we can talk about the definitions or those reasons later, but that's what I was thinking as well. Is area possibly a definition here? Also, I wouldn't expect you to be able to answer this, Jared, because you haven't been here that long, but what is the history of the magic number of 32 square feet? What does that represent, 32 square feet?
I guess you're right. I haven't been here that long. I can't tell you where that number came up with, but I will give you my best guess is that somebody else defined that, and when we adopted it, we said, oh, Altoona or Eau Claire or Boyd or whoever we adopted our zoning ordinance from had defined it as 32 square feet.
Yeah.
And to be real honest, if we're talking a bulletin board, which is what they're calling out, you think of an old style bulletin board, 32 square feet was plenty of room for a changeable bulletin board. We can scratch our eyes a little bit and say that this digital sign is a digital bulletin board, and I think that's reasonable to say that, this isn't, technology has changed. When the code was written, we didn't have digital signs, but I think it's reasonable to say that this is a digital bulletin board.
I didn't know if they were going by just like a sheet of plywood, 32 square feet,
Yeah.
4 by 8? Is that
Yeah.
where that came from, or what was the thought? I was curious what the history was.
I'll just tell you that my guess is that it came from
Okay,
somebody else and we just adopted it.
okay. I also had questions under the, I don't mean to hog here, so you guys jump in whenever you want, but under the, I think it was the same section you were reading out of. Yes, 268-42B, which you read out of, continues to say 1 per zoning lot. Well, the church already has 2 signs. So, I mean, are we grandfathering it in? Or do we ignore that part of it?
I don't, well, maybe I'm wrong, but the way I read this, 268-42B is talking about a digital billboard. It's not talking about signs in general, it's specifically talking about a digital billboard or a billboard.
Billboard.
Yeah, it's specifically talking about a billboard.
Okay.
I'm stretching to get digital,
Okay.
but there's
Well,
only
it
one
says
billboard.
bulletin boards and identification signs for churches, and of course they have that, I believe it was the sign that at one time was on the old church before they built the new church. And they've got it on the corner of, Liberty and Randall Road there.
I'm trying to find it, but I think
So
there's
I'm
somewhere that
just-
says you can't have more than 3, but that might be for commercial only.
Yeah. It was just something that jumped out at me when it said the number 1.
One per zoning lot.
That-
Is there more than one zoning lot or?
I think that it's all one
It's all
lot.
one
It's a
lot.
huge lot, but it is just one lot.
Okay.
So that was a point that jumped out at me. Under prohibitions for all signs, point 268-44 A and D jumped out at me. Signs which obstruct the vision of drivers or pedestrians, do we gotta worry at all about that as far as that sign sticking out to the point where people stopping on Randall Road are gonna be able to see the traffic on State Street?
I don't think so. If you look at where they're placing the sign, they're down there by the parking lot entrance. So, I mean, you talk about this lot being a huge lot. They're down almost all the way to the playground. You're several hundred feet from the vision triangle.
Okay,
as
so
far-
this sign is not replacing one of the 2 signs now?
This is a new sign.
So now they're gonna have 3 signs?
Yes. The
Oh,
request is for a 3rd sign.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I didn't
I-
confirm that they didn't plan on taking one of the ones out,
Oh.
but it's not in the same location
I
as the
thought it
existing
was
sign.
replacing the sign out in front of the church, but no.
No, this is a new standalone sign. Now, there is a requirement that says that it has to be 10 feet off of the property line, which in this case is gonna be the sidewalk, plus or minus a foot. Sometime, I didn't check this one specifically, we might be right on the sidewalk, we might be a foot off. But it would have to be 10 feet off the sidewalk, back into the lot, which as far as a vision concern, I don't think there's a vision concern there.
And they are not considering the pedestal as a part of the sign.
Well, and that's the other part, when you start talking about, number of square feet.
Right, because when I edited up, I went.
Or height?
But-
Yeah, and that's, under the most generous term I could come up with, they were outside of their, permitted size. If you started counting the pedestal or everything else, they're definitely outside of it. But one way or another, under any variation, the sign is outside of it. Cause to be honest, what I was really trying to do is figure out how can I sign the bottom of this and say, yep, thanks church, we're happy to have you have a new sign. It's really what I was trying to do, but I just didn't see a way to.
So the definition of area, you just don't, right?
Yeah, so we
Like a
don't,
ratio
so,
of
so
footprint
in our area, we do not, or in the zoning at the beginning, we do not define area. We do define, there's a couple of places, and I'm not quite done, I'll keep looking, but there's a couple of places that we have area listed, such as, area for a parking area, but give me just a second, I'll pay attention to that.
Well, while you're looking that up, I'll mention the other point that I had. Letter D in 268-44 speaks, and this again, the prohibited signs, which I assume is all zoning districts, signs which make use of flashing, revolving, animated, or intermittent lights or are animated are prohibited. Exemptions are time and temperature information. So that's going back to when the only signs like that were on the banks that flash the time and temperature. Wouldn't this sign fall under something that's flashing, revolving, and showing intermittent lights?
That has not been our interpretation of it. For instance, we just permitted, the gas station
a digital signboard, and it's a digital light. It has the ability to change.
Was it Akron stop or was it?
Yeah, the Falmart. It's not in place yet, but Falmart has been permitted a new sign there.
The school has one.
Yep, the school has one.
And there's no explanation in your memory as to how the school was able to approve a sign of that size without a variance?
I've pulled the permit.
Mm-hmm,
They stated under the he called it a digital billboard.
yeah.
And signed off on it. To be honest, I think they just didn't measure the square footage. I don't
It's
know
never
that.
mentioned in the
No, the permit shows, I just don't think
permit listed the square footage?
well, it had the drawing, same as this sign company has, showing how big the sign is.
Well, the square footage is specifically noted as the issue in the application for variance. It says right in here, installing a freestanding sign exceeding
The
32 square
difference is
feet.
who's the zoning administrator today versus who was the zoning administrator 5 years ago. And to be real honest, that is the difference is,
Mhm.
I measured and said that doesn't fit within our current zoning, and I did not issue the permit. They said, is that final, is there anything we can do? I said, well, yes, you can pursue, you can pursue it through the zoning board of appeals. It's not you can do an appeal or conditional use, it's not a use requirement. The zoning, it's not a conditional use permit, there's not a problem with it, it's a sizing issue. So the appeal for me having said no is this body. What I did tell them is I read them the same thing it says on our application that says the zoning board of appeals can only hear based on these requirements. I can't remember exactly the way I said it, but in my conversation I did say that it's not my understanding that that's something the zoning board of appeals can do, but you're more than welcome to submit your money and put in an appeal. They have that right or ability to do that. But I did mention that to them when I told them no initially. But it's honestly a difference of who the zoning administrator is today. I don't know that. I'd take that back. I did not call 2 zoning administrators ago to confirm that.
Yeah.
I just know that
Okay.
it was permitted and it clearly falls without. He signed it and said it's a digital billboard and away they went, and I did not.
Does the zoning code need clarification or updating, seeing that now it's speaking to signage as it was in the 60s and the 70s, rather than the signage of today's world?
Absolutely. I honestly got a group of people looking at some of our ordinances right now, signage being one of them. We've had some complaints on 12 and some other places, and I don't think they're wrong. There's a group that are making some recommendations as we speak. I think this is an excellent example of something that we ought to be able to consider. It's just the way I read it, the ordinance says no. So we talk about the minimum floor area. So if you look in, for instance, dimensional requirements, you get a minimum lot area and you get a minimum floor area per dwelling.
Which section are you in, Jared?
It doesn't matter. Look at residential districts, R1. So if you go to R1, 4 dimensional requirements, you get a minimum lot area of 10,000 feet. You get a minimum width of 100 feet, you get your requirements, side yard setback, rear yard setbacks, and then you get a minimum floor area per dwelling unit. So we have 2 different areas that we're defining here. But it's how much of the lot you're using up or how big your lot is. I do not specifically see that we define area. I guess I could put on my computer and control find and see if there's somewhere else that it's listed, but I do not specifically see one, but this is what I was looking for, is that we call these out in each of our zoning districts. We're calling out areas, how big your lot is, that it has to be 10,000 feet or 15,000 feet. And we also call it out how big your floor area has to be.
Has anybody had, nobody on our committee has, but speaking to Jared, probably mostly here, or Joan, if she's heard from the church as part of the application, have we heard anything from them about why it has to be this size? I mean, at 32 square feet, is the visibility just not good enough for a drive-by sign? If you shrink it by
The
a
sign
third?
The sign company did go back and talk with the church, from my understanding. We had an initial conversation when I told them that this was outside of it, they could shrink it to 32 feet, that we could permit it, but that, as it said, at 42 it was too big. I said, okay, we'll go back and talk with the church and see what they want to do. And then my next communication with them was them saying they'd like to proceed with the sign the size it is. We'd like to proceed with the putting in an appeal. I'm paraphrasing horribly, but
So their sign area at 47 1/8 square feet. What part of the depicted sign does that represent?
the smallest portion that I could come up with out of those measurements. So if you look at the drawings, sorry, two papers pulled up ahead of me. If you were to take from ground level to top of sign, from far outside to far outside,
Yeah.
let's just do that really quick. Oh, you already pulled it? Did you pull the area though?
Oh,
It'd
the
be like
area is, the whole
126.
thing is 70.
Yeah,
feet
I was gonna
on
say it's 100 and something square. I mean, if you just pulled it, this is how much
70 square feet,
this is how much space we're blocking out. You're blocking out a significant period. In trying to be, I was looking at it in the smallest percent possible, it was still over. If you take the pedestal out of it, if you're not taking the St. Paul Lutheran Church, but to be honest, the St. Paul Lutheran and the digital are all sign. It's only the pedestal. But under no circumstance could I get that down. It's going to be a large sign. I mean, and honestly, I don't have a problem with that. They've got a very large lot. They're able to take it off the back of the property line. It fits for being in front of a school/church. Like nobody would look at the one in front of the elementary and say that's out of place.
Right.
In front of the school, that makes perfect sense to have a. I think
Yeah,
it fits
it's
with
proven the concept, whether 5 years ago it should have been approved or denied. I think the school sign proves that it's not a problem. But that doesn't weigh on whether or not I think our group can approve this, given the ordinances the way they're
Yeah.
written today.
Well, is it a two wrongs don't make a right scenario? If it was didn't go through the right channels the last time, and this time it is, you don't necessarily have to end up at the same decision, do you?
the problem is they did go through the right channels, and they have a valid building
Well,
permit.
They went through the right channels only because a call to the zoning board of appeals wasn't made, and on the face, it appears that it should have been.
On the face, to me, it appears like there should have been a zoning amendment made to the ordinance if we wanted to allow it, to change the ordinance and say, okay, let's make the signing.
And you say that there's a team working on doing some of that evaluation.
Yeah, so we had a group meet, a month ago, John?
Probably hasn't been that long, 3-4 weeks maybe tops.
Yeah, but we had a group meet that's gonna make recommendations. They're kind of split. Some were looking at signs, some were looking at various aspects for some recommendations. Signs was one of the ones that I requested specifically, this one in mind. Like I said, we have a few on 12 that we could stand some clarity. Whatever we're going to do, it needs to be enforced equally to everybody, but there could stand to be a little clarity.
And is that clarity forthcoming in a reasonable amount of time such that could weigh in our decision?
I don't think we can decide on it. I mean, when somebody wants to address Tim, but I don't think we can decide on anything based on ordinance. Is it one of these things that state we can consider it? Because if it's not, whether we think it ought to be, or whether we think it should be, or whether it's a great thing, unless it's one of these stated reasons, I don't think we can grant it.
Well, it says right in there that the only way we can approve it is if we can provide the supporting information to do it. Tim?
Yeah, just a recommendation, remember you were talking about normal due process, and I think that, maybe there is mechanisms to request an ordinance update if somebody wanted to, but ordinance updates happen on their own to like this committee, I guess any anyway, so that's sort of what I'd say the normal channel. If it's not something in there, then you look and say, should it be updated and who can do that? The other thing I'd say maybe is something to consider if you do deny this would be maybe if you could make a recommendation with, if due to this is something that's being looked at, if applicable, waive the fee next time if it comes back. You know, it would be something to, you know, see if the board could, you know, board or planning commission, I know that would go to is to waive that fee. So kind of push it to the side a little bit, say then if they wanted to, you know, come back and, you know, reapply because something was up, Jared, thoughts on that?
The fee, I think, is $10, to be real honest.
Oh, it's not the 150?
No, the 150 is for this appeal. If we were to do a, if we were to make an ordinance update,
That was a lot.
then we wouldn't be having this group meet. If there was an ordinance update, I could approve it.
Yeah, the point I was making is if it becomes, it's still 32, but you put it in listed variances or something, that's when I would.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Then I would make another, not knowing what would happen, right? But if it became something you could ask for a variance on later, rather than it's just prescribed in the ordinance, then do that fee, but.
Yeah, yep, that's a good point, that's a good ask.
My
From the-
thought process
from the
was
floor.
if we thought that this was a bad decision or a bad ordinance, if we felt like there was a concern with it, that we could request, or not we, I don't sit on here, that you all could request that this item particularly be looked at by that group. It is kind of being looked at, their emphasis was 12, but if we thought that this was a problem, if we weren't to approve it, maybe this group could do a part of their motion to send that to planning commission. It'll go to the board ultimately, but planning commission has to review it first for a potential ordinance update.
Val, did you have some comments or questions?
So I don't. My question was about the Highway 12 sign. So is that one is very similar in size to the schools, or does that fall into the 32 square feet?
I apologize, which sign?
The
one that's out on
information sign
12?
that you guys babysit.
So that one's in a commercial district, so it's a little bit different. Commercial district versus downtown district have different, well, it wasn't a commercial district, we've now reclassified it as, public property, but it was a commercial district sign when that was put in place versus a residential sign.
Different connotations.
Yeah.
So it could be larger then.
Yes.
Okay, so I
Well,
guess.
hang on, let me phrase that.
So I'm kind of,
Let me rephrase
I'm
that
kind
without-
of the,
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
so
Val.
I guess I'm kind of on that thought process of, you know, if we've got the schools is an incorrect size, so to speak, compared to what it should be now, and there was nothing done, maybe instead of saying absolutely not, they can't do it, maybe we need to have that revisited and looked at, and the sign size needs to be, you know, increased. But, you know, I guess that, I don't have a problem with it either, but if it's an incorrect size and we're not playing by the rules and keeping the rules straight off for everyone, you know, that's not quite right either.
Well, and I think there's a valid question here about authority, which is what Jared brought up in his letter, was do we even have the authority to grant an area variance for this particular type of a request, because it doesn't seem to fall under the definition of an area variance, because it doesn't hit on any of the criteria for that.
I believe that we do.
Tim?
But I think if you, to support that, there's a definition for variances at the beginning of that, chapter 2, that might help you with that.
Well, Jared had went through the different items we had to look at, and it wasn't a question of height, bulk, setback, yard, parking, or basement, so then it could only
Yeah,
be,
I'm just thinking
it could only be area, but I thought he said that the area was defined as lot size for the most part.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that definition helps you out with the definition of area, because it says that this is what the variances are for is yard, and So yard has, you know, area specifications with it, so really, I think what it's saying, area, it's talking about that definition of yard, bulk, setbacks. Really, the only thing in that definition of variances is yard. Did you see that at the very beginning? It's like 268 actually. Disappointing. If that helps you with that confusion area.
Anybody else find that?
Yeah, a relaxation of the terms of this
Where you
chapter.
at, 268 what?
268, so if it's what I'm thinking, it's in the definitions. So in the definitions, 268, was that 3? At the end of the definitions, you have variance or relaxation of the terms of this chapter by the zoning board of appeals, where the literal enforcement of this chapter would deny the property owner a use of his property enjoyed as a right by other property owners within the same zoning district. Variances shall be limited to height, bulk, yard requirements, residential basements, and garage requirements. Once again, it's just confirming what it's very similar to what the other one says in 268-70B or whatever it was. It states that we can only do an area variance for one of those several things.
Have we exhausted our questions and comments? No, I think Wesley wanted to say something.
I believe we have the authority to make this determination. If the purpose of the Board of Appeals is to explicitly enforce the ordinance as they stand on paper, then the Board of Appeals might as well not exist. Because it should be brought up to a Board of Appeals to make a human decision. A computer could make a set of if-then-else statements to decide whether or not something follows an ordinance. We need humans to decide this. We can't just look at the paper. I think we need to make a decision.
Well, that would be true if we were looking at 42 square feet versus 32, or 47 versus 32. You're right, the computer could do that. But what Jared's point is, do we even have the authority to act on this particular request? So that's not something a computer could decide. I don't think that's something that humans have to decide. Do we have the authority to decide, because based on the definition, we're approving it or denying it based on criteria that aren't part of the admittedly, possibly outdated and antiquated zoning code. But do we even have the authority to do it? Jared's saying no.
I think you're 100% right. If we're talking about setbacks or building heights or any of those things that are listed, the village board, because the village board had the authority originally when they set up the zoning board of appeals or the state legislature, they delegate a portion of those legislative or semi-judicial powers, right? Everybody gets their authority from somewhere. Ultimately, everybody gets it from the people, but when the village board set up this group, they did give a bounding of you have the authority to act within this portion, and they've limited it to one of these 5 or 7 or however many things. And if we were within those things, you're 100% right. That's if then. I mean, if it was just a computer can spit it out if it's if then, but I think we've been bound on. It's not one of the listed things. I don't know that we have the ability to go say, hey, I want a variance to the speeding tickets. I mean, it's not in here either.
And it looks like the zoning board of appeals is limited to what they can approve as well. I mean, it says where it is alleged there's an error in any order, or to authorize upon appeal in specific cases variance within the terms of this chapter where, owing to special conditions, right? But a literal enforcement of this chapter would result in unnecessary hardship. I mean, there's
The gray area?
So, you know, I think you're right, it's not really and I could be wrong, but, you know, I've been on the zoning board of appeals before in Altoona and have some examples where it was applicable, but you're not there to decide, you know, supposed to look at it and decide, does somebody have a special circumstance, like it says in the definition, where they can't enjoy like everybody else? So an example of this is, somebody has a lot, it's a unique lot, it's got 2 elevations. They wanna put a garage on, everybody else can put a garage on, but with their setback, they can't do it, because it sits right on so if they needed to move their garage forward, violate the setback by 5 feet, not let them put it on the elevated portion versus the unusable, that's like, yes, you have a unique lot. You're different than everybody else. We'll let you violate the setback so that you can enjoy the garage just like everybody else. So that's what I've seen it as. It's not really an elected board or anything else that gets to decide, like, oh, it's a loophole, so I'm gonna decide for you. If it's not clear, then you say, perhaps we need some updates or clarity or something like that. You're not here to poke holes in an ordinance. It's, does somebody have special, that's just my opinion. That's what I've seen advertised for and used as before.
I feel like we need legal counsel to make this determination if we have the authority to do this then.
Say that again, I don't think I heard it.
I think we might need legal counsel to determine if we have the authority to make that decision.
That's,
Based on
just another, that's fine, you can make that recommendation. I'd say you want a majority of your group to do that, and then go to the board, it's spending money, and then I'd have to go to the board to spend the money, the government money to be able to do that. So if that's possible, you can kind of decide as a group if it's not clear. That's not
Zoning board of appeals can spend money without. I know the commission can, but can zoning board of appeals?
Should we spend money to look at the legalities of the current wording, or, which would take time, or should we wait and see how the current wording is updated to reflect, today's advertising world, so to speak, today's signage world? We can't run to the lawyer for an opinion every time we, try to work with outdated, that's my opinion, outdated terminologies. Go ahead, John.
The desire or request to get legal advice, is that within our bounds and binding? If we just say, yeah, we'd like legal advice, then it has to happen? Or is that a request that we make to, or a recommendation that we make? Would we make a recommendation that legal advice be sought? But I mean, and you get my question?
Yeah.
We can't just say, yeah, let's go get a lawyer. We don't have the authority to do that either, do we? Or
Well,
do
I
we
was
need
just
to get a
looking that
lawyer
up.
to find out if we have the
Planning commission
authority
can.
to get a lawyer?
Planning commission has the ability to spend money. I just went, because I remembered that one of these groups had the ability to spend money, and it might have been this group, and so I just went to look to see who has the ability to spend money. The planning commission can spend money, but we're not specifically listed as being able to. And I will tell you from our conversations with the village's attorney on similar ordinances, because this isn't the first time we've had a similar question, not necessarily an ordinance, but Garrett's, is our attorney, and Garrett's going to say, when in doubt, what's written on the face is how it's going to be interpreted. And if that's the direction this group wants to go, if they want to pursue a request, then that'll go to the board, and the board can decide whether they want to spend money. And yeah, I think in lack of being, or without having been authorized to spend money, this group doesn't have any money, doesn't have any taxing authorities. I think it would have to go to the board. However, I don't think that the attorney is going to, he might say that, yeah, you don't like this, it should be changed, you can have updates. But as it's been shown previous when we've sought opinions on other things, what's written, if it doesn't say it in the ordinance, you can do it, or if it's precluding you from what's written, I don't think we're going to get, I would be surprised, let me say that, if the attorney,
He's gonna take the more conservative path.
yeah.
He's not gonna offer an opinion that would allow us to vary from what's written.
But it's an option, I mean,
I guess I would like to offer one more comment in
Mhm.
conjunction with Val's comment about, is the sign at the school or is the sign in the park, or other questions about where have things possibly not been in compliance in the past. Although I think that's a valid point, but I think it leads right to what's going on in the reconsideration by the planning commission of current ordinances and the review and the recommendations to try to bring things up to a workable, modern, if you will, content, and that has to start somewhere. If our justification for granting a variance is based on the fact, well, it happened before and this is equally as worthy, maybe we should let this one go too, then that starting point of consistency and fairness and working within a structure that the village can apply everywhere with a clear understanding and with recourse, not if then else computer logic, but with the ability to look at circumstances, but at least now trying to repair and close those doors, side doors, back doors, whatever they were, that possibly have been used in the past to create circumstances that appear to be in violation of zoning.
I will say the park had 132 square feet that they could have for their sign. I did just look that up. There was a freestanding sign in a C1. In commercial districts, they can have 132 square feet, which might be a starting point for what we allow in R1 or R2. It is just the school that's the...
That's the one that's definitely a residential lot with a non-conforming or
I think my comment
approved
was
sign.
meant to be in support of you, Val, that I recognize.
Oh, thank
that
you.
this happened in the
Oh, yeah, that's
past,
all right.
But I think that we do need to look to the future in this as well.
Could I please make a comment as well?
And who's this?
Absolutely.
And who's this?
My name is Frank with Sign Art. I'm the applicant, and I'm also representing the church.
Yes, Frank.
I just wanted to make some comparisons inside the city. So Revival Church is also zoned R1 and has an overall frontage of 130 feet. They have an existing pole sign with an area of 52 square feet. And in comparison to St. Paul's lot, St. Paul has 565 feet of frontage, a little over 3 acres. So, with the lot size difference, I feel that the proposed 48 square foot sign, it's less than Revival's 52 square foot sign, which is also residential. And then as you have also been talking about the high school, they have the digital sign as well. We actually measured their sign. It's 9'5" high by 10'4" wide for just the sign copy area, which is roughly 94 square feet. So, that's almost double the size of what we're proposing at the church. And the church, has a large lot, just like the school does. So those are some other things to think about as well when considering this sign.
So as long as we got you on, you want to clarify us on the math to get to the 47 1/8?
Yeah, so let's see, the latest artwork I have here shows the overall sign height at, overall sign height at 9'9", with the sign copy area being 6'7" high by 7'3" wide, giving it the overall size of 47.73 square feet of sign copy area. And I know you had mentioned the shroud enclosure at the bottom of the sign. In other municipalities where I've dealt with this, they do not count the pole cover or the shroud area as part of the sign copy area. And a lot of municipalities actually require a pole cover.
Since you represent the church as well, can you speak to any sort of distress or duress for not having such a sign?
So actually, Matt Snyder, he's been working with the church on this sign project. He's actually on vacation right now. I'm his coworker, so he kind of just gave me the rundown on this project. I got the artwork, I've got the code. I know you've been referencing 268.2, which says, it also has right in the text there. Let's see, for churches, schools, and other permitted institutions. So with the school having, you know, the 97 square foot sign, with churches being in the same definitions, I feel that the, you know, 47.7 square feet would be appropriate based on the lot size and the proximity to the school and the sign type similarities.
So,
I'm sorry to keep, I'm just trying to help, you know, for references and things like that. So, this was in the handbook, right? It says, while it is tempting to think of the zoning boards as providing flexibility in administrative zoning, flexibility is strictly limited by state and local laws that determine the authority of zoning boards and provide criteria for decision making. Local governing bodies and the public must look beyond the zoning board for added flexibility. Map and text amendments, performance standards, alternative design standards, standards for conditional uses and mitigation requirements, that are all can be integrated into local ordinance. So in short, what it's saying, don't look for added flexibility here, look to make permanent updates in ordinances if you want. Go through that channel. That's in the zoning board of appeals.
and I don't know that a Board of Appeals is a board that can make use of precedents from past situations as well. I don't know that that's something that's built into the system.
On a different zoning issue, because this isn't the first time this has come up, I did seek some legal guidance about how we handled it, because it was, there'd been a permit that had been signed and it was able to be used that didn't follow zoning ordinance. And depending on where in the process, the attorney essentially said a municipal official acting outside of their ability do not have the ability to proceed or to create a precedent. If a village board is making precedent, that's one thing, but an employee, a non-elected official can't establish a precedent by having made a mistake or interpreting it different. They can't establish precedent. They didn't have that ability to establish precedent.
Now, did the sign that was done for the school, did that go through the Board of Appeals, or did that just go through the?
Zoning administrator signed off on it. So the typical process for this sign is that you would put in a building permit, the zoning administrator looks at it and determines whether or not it fits the zoning requirement, and the building inspector would actually look at it because it's a lit sign, so there's an electrical component to it, and we would issue a building permit for the sign. As long as they fit within the listed characteristics, we'd sign it. You guys would drive past one day and go, oh, look, the church put up a new sign, and nobody would ever know the difference, which is what happened at the school. So and I don't know this, it's just 100% subjective, but if the zoning administrator at the time didn't measure or didn't look at it, well, oh yeah, that's 90 or 40, or I don't know what the number is, I haven't gone to look, but whatever that number is, it's definitely over 32 square feet.
Yeah.
If the zoning administrator at the time didn't look at it, the building inspector would have said, hey, I've got electrical, I've got whatever I need structurally, and signed off on it. It was done, and nobody.
It was done without input from the public.
Which is how every building, or 90% of the building permits happen, but the problem is that it was happened in air. It didn't fit what was written in the code.
Okay.
Say, Frank, you guys are the sign designers, not me, and I was under the mistaken assumption that this sign was replacing the sign that's on State Street now, which it's not doing. So how critical is it that the sign identify it as St. Paul's Lutheran Church? I mean, if the main part of the sign is the message board, couldn't you get in under 32 square feet just by removing the top part of the sign when you got one 50 feet away that says St. Paul's Lutheran Church on it? Again, I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but it just seems like that's redundant, and that's what made me think it was a replacement sign.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure their intentions on the existing sign. I assume you're talking one on the east side of their lot facing Double K. That's that small brick one with the
Right.
letters on the brick.
Right.
Or the south side one, or the one on State, right as you go into the.
And isn't this one gonna be in that same area, just further to the north?
Yeah, this would be further to the north,
Yeah.
towards other entrance. But I mean, if that small stone sign is kind of what's holding up
No,
the
it's,
addition.
it's not, it's just, I just didn't see how critical it was. I mean, if 32 square feet gets it done and you still have the message board in its current dimensions, all you've lost is the identification of the church, which is already on 2 other signs on the property.
To be honest, if they wait a couple of well, it'll be a few months, but if they wait a few months, it might very likely go away on its own, and they might be able to do it under the normal channels. Can't guarantee that,
Yeah.
but
No, if we deny today, then we could still do.
A lot of municipalities that we deal with, if you want to have an electronic message center, you have to have an identification cabinet above or below it or next to it. You can't just have a standalone message center. So that's kind of how we base our designs. You know, the other sign that's existing, has a further setback. It's only 2 feet off of the ground. So it's not really, vision-wise, it's not very effective for traffic.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I can see valid points for it. I just bring it up, it's just the 3rd sign on the property that says the same thing. That was my only point, but I'm not saying it's not effective or necessary.
Where is the 3rd sign at the church that you're speaking of? Because I see the small stone sign.
Yeah, then
Is it-
there's one on the, would be the southwest corner of the property, on the other side of, on the other side of the building.
Okay, yep, so
that's irrelevant. I mean, if they
that was
want to-
unavailable on my street view here that I'm looking at right now on Google Street View.
Okay.
So,
World has
No,
changed.
I'm not gonna tell you how to design signs, that's your life, so no, I was just bringing it up as a point of conversation, so. Just trying to find a way to get in under 32 easily, but absent that, I guess what's the pleasure of the group as our discussion winds down here and our comments and our questions? Is there any action to be taken tonight?
I would personally like to approve the sign, but as for everything that's been said tonight, it looks like we don't have the authority to do that variance approval based on past precedents and on the wording of the ordinance itself. So I move to deny.
Move to deny based on a lack of authority has been made by Wesley. Is there a second?
I would second it.
Second by Val. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have the vote. You want to call the roll, Joan?
Callahan,
Yes.
Keen,
Yes.
Mattoon,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Bennett,
Yes.
Motion to deny. It's approved 5-0. Is there any thoughts about having an additional motion to consider suggestion Tim had about re-examining it if it comes before the board with a fee waiver, if the authority of the group is changed in the future? Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect, or if not, we'll adjourn?
I think Tim wants to say something.
Another comment from the floor? Yes, Tim?
Like Jared had said, if you wanna make a motion to recommend to the subcommittees and plan commission to look at this section of the sign, that would be a good motion too, so it's not.
That could even be made as part of the same motion.
Yeah, it's the same motion.
Yeah,
I agree.
a motion to consider it, to bring the language up to current date and to, and specific to this one, possible fee waiver if there's an additional zoning board of appeal action required in the future. Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect?
I would like to make a motion to that effect and also add into it, for the ordinance, recommended to be changed to give the Board of Appeals the ability to add variance for any dimensions on the sign. I see no reason why the board was restricted in this way to not allow variance based on the area of the sign itself.
My understanding was that's exactly what the variance would be for if it exceeded the dimensions.
So I think there's 2 parts here, right? One is to make a recommendation that we change the change the requirements so that we wouldn't have to have this come up. But in a different situation with a different sign and different dimensions, Wesley is requesting that there would also be an ordinance, or Mr. Ben, I don't know, whatever you prefer to be addressed as, that you would change also an ordinance where it's specifically listing these things to add sign sizes or some similar version to that list.
Got it.
So
Where-
that
where
for a
it
different
talks
sign at a
about-
different time, that this group would have the ability to
Height,
grant a
setbacks,
variance for that.
Sign size should be added
Yeah,
into
something
that.
like, was that correct?
Yes, I think whenever we have, in government, a big hullabaloo, because there's things that are unclear, I think that that's an opportunity to clarify such things for the future. So I think it's an opportunity for us to pass along to the board itself, to ask them to clarify that a bit further.
Okay.
Or to decide, no, we're not, or decide definitively, no, we're not gonna give the Board of Appeals that authority.
Okay, Joan, could you read back the motion as it currently stands?
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Apologies ahead in advance.
so first was the move to deny the,
That one's passed.
variance based on lack of authority.
And that passed.
Yep.
And then we have a motion on the floor right now, which reads,
To update the ordinance language to address sign size as part of the area variance requirements?
It's recorded. Typically, we write these motions off of the recording and then we delete them when we use these for writing minutes. So she doesn't typically try and write that down verbatim,
yeah,
because she's gonna listen to the recording and then write it off of that.
okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what they were voting on.
If somebody would like to restate it to make sure that
Yeah.
that's, but typically she's.
Sounds
gonna-
pretty good to me, so what you've stated so far.
Clarification question, because I got the first part wrong. Are we making a recommendation for the subcommittee on planning commission to consider this?
I think it's to the planning
Or are
commission and
we-
it would go to the subcommittee, but I think you just referred to the planning
Whatever
commission.
route it needs to go, we'll go.
To,
So we're making this recommendation and it'll go to the right place.
Yeah, it'll go to the planning commission, but yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor that our group is recommending to the planning commission to look at this language and make changes that would give us the authority to act on signage size requirements.
To be fair, the planning commission probably will send it directly to that subcommittee, probably will go directly there, but the decision maker will be the planning
Do we have a
commission.
second for that motion?
Second.
John seconded it already, I'm sorry. So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. You wanna do the roll on that as well?
if you want.
Sure.
Keen,
Yes.
Mattoon,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes?
Bennett,
Yes.
Callahan.
Yes,
Okay. And does anybody feel it's necessary to have an additional motion respective to these applicants if it should come back before us as far as a fee waiver? Or should we just deal with it at that time?
I think we should deal with it at that time.
Very well. Then do we have a motion to adjourn? Our agenda is exhausted.
I have one final question, if you'll accept it.
Yes, go ahead.
So, based off this meeting, I assume if we were to propose the same exact sign, but with an overall sign area of 32 square feet, that it would most likely be approved and a permit issued.
That'd be up to the zoning administrator.
Yeah, a 32 square, so to be real honest, your best bet is to just plain wait a month or two and you can resubmit this exact same sign very likely, which is what I told your partner, and my guess is it's the church that didn't want, I don't know, I don't want to suppose. But hopefully we will address this to the extent that this sign can be built anyways, but it's gonna have to go through a different avenue than this group.
The gears of government turn slowly but intentionally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, for attending in the absence of your coworker. Appreciate you pinch hitting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Wesley moves. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I.
Motion is adjourned.
All right, I'm gonna close this meeting. As a side note, you don't actually have to vote to adjourn,
Oh, we don't?
no.
It's
When
on
you-
the agenda.
Well, you do have to adjourn, but when the agenda is exhausted,
Oh,
um,
then you adjourn, huh?
then you just, the chair can just state that the meeting is adjourned.
Okay, got it,
But you can't, I mean, didn't hurt anything, but you actually don't have to.
got it.